Blaze Media national correspondent Julio Rosas explains why he left the Trump assassination attempt press conferences with more questions than answers. Bedford asserts that Mitch McConnell is not only at odds with Donald Trump, but also the Republican voter base. And the Miami Heat get roasted online for diversity statements on Haitians. We have those stories and so much more. Blaze News Tonight starts right now. The chaos. I'm Jill Savage. Today is Wednesday, September 18th. Everyone is looking for answers on the second Trump assassination attempt, and Blaze Media has been investigating it, and we will not let this get memory hold. So here to break it all down is Matthew Peterson, editor-in-chief of Blaze News, and Julio Rosas, Blaze Media's national correspondent. And Julio, you've been there from the beginning. So what have you seen on the ground there in Florida?
Well, I mean, there's certainly been a lot harder to get to Mar-a-Lago these days, hasn't even after the first attempt. But now the Palm Beach County Sheriff has said that Mar-a-Lago and its surrounding area is at the highest level of security it can be, and it's equivalent to when he was president. And as you mentioned, like there's questions, and so it's like, okay, well then why wasn't that in that state in the aftermath of the first assassination attempt in July? But what I can tell you is that the benefit for this unfortunate situation happening in Florida is that there seems to be more proactive measures at the state and local level to try to prevent something like this from happening again, at least here, and also trying to find out how the second attempt came to be, less than a week ago.
Julio, it's a wild ride. I mean, for those following along, Julio went from Springfield, Ohio, to the scene of the second assassination attempt in short order. So talk about that a little bit. I mean, how you see the big unanswered questions that are still swirling with, how this gunman was given another chance by another gunman to potentially attack the former president of the United States.
Yeah, so the biggest question right now is how did the shooter apparently have the knowledge to set himself up for 12 hours, or at least be outside of the Trump International Golf Course for 12 hours before the moment where the Secret Service agent spotted him with the rifle barrel poking out of the fence. So, because according to everybody, this golf trip was not on Trump's schedule. This was kind of more of a day of kind of decision. And so that's why the acting director of the Secret Service was saying, well, see, that's why the security was not as it normally is. This wasn't like a rally, right? This wasn't a campaign event. This was just Trump doing his Trump thing, right? He's going golfing on a Sunday. And so, but the answer to that is, okay, well, even if this is not a well thought out or a significantly planned out trip, why was this guy allowed to still be in the sniper's hide when that very spot of that on the perimeter of the golf course has been known for a very long time to be an area where photographers can try to get in and sneak up and get snapshots of the president while he's out golfing. And so you would think that, someone would have known to, hey, maybe we should do a sweep, whether it's aerial, whether it's on foot. And then, specifically for this area, let's make sure that there's no one hiding in there. Right. That hasn't been answered yet. And the acting director of the Secret Service, Ronald Rowe, he defended the agency, saying that the agency's plans for keeping Trump safe in the aftermath of July 13th are working. And he said that the Secret Service agent shooting at the second would-be assassin further proves that point. But obviously, if you have Secret Service agents firing their weapons, that seems kind of as more of a last-ditch effort for what should be multiple layers before you get to that point.
All right, Julio, you mentioned acting director of the Secret Service, Ronald Rowe. While you've been in Florida, you had a nice little encounter with him. We played the video on our show the other day, but I would love for you to just walk everybody through how that went with Ronald Rowe.
Yes. So this was Tuesday. He flew in. The director flew in to meet with Trump to walk the scene and then give the press an update. And I wasn't called on. That's fine. It happens during the press conference. And so I was leaving, just kind of thinking, okay, this is the press conference. Let's see what we got. And I exited this area first, and the director then came out a different door, a couple steps behind me. So I thought, okay, well, here I can ask this question that kind of seems everyone wants to have an answer to. And so I walk down the steps. Then that's when I start my video. I see him coming down. I start asking him my question, and his bag man. You can't see it because I shot the video vertically, but the bag man kind of just waved his hand saying, no, we're not taking any questions. But unfortunate for him, he's a public official paid for by taxpayers. He's leaving a press conference. It's more than fair to try to ask a question, especially as a hot topic as this. And so as I'm asking my question, because Rowe keeps walking past me and I start following him, the bag man grabs onto the handle of my backpack, and that's why I kind of lose my train of thought for a second because I'm not expecting this. And I finished my question, and then that's when I turn around to the guy. I said, "Hey, excuse me, you don't need to do that." And the guy says, "Well, I'm just trying to get past." And I'm not a wide guy. I work out. I'm not very wide. And so this walkway was not at all restrictive to the point where this guy had to grab onto me. But he didn't move past me. He kept holding on to me. So that's why this idea that he was just simply trying to get past. I don't buy it at all for a second. But more importantly, this walkway was not wide enough, was not narrow to the point where he had to grab me and try to impede my movement. And I understand, people can be more confrontational when it comes to certain things, but I was not that. I wasn't impeding Rowe's advance, trying to leave the scene and trying to leave the area. I'm just doing what a reporter does, right? You just follow along. You don't get in their way. You're asking. You don't yell. You don't act unhinged. And Rowe didn't say anything. He didn't say anything to me asking. And this is what a lot of people have been asking is why can't things drastically change? Because whatever you guys have planned isn't fully working. I'm like, yes, the guy wasn't able to get a shot off, but he got to a point where he was minutes away from being able to do so. And so Rowe didn't answer that.
Julio, it's a wild scene. I guess the press conference you went to yesterday, was it, with Governor DeSantis, was a little less eventful, right? In terms of no one grabbing you or attempting to avoid your questions. Tell us about that, and tell us your thoughts on what Florida is doing to take the lead in conducting its own investigation on this assassination attempt.
Well, the biggest difference was the tone. Obviously, what the feds, with the FBI, the Secret Service, they're saying we're still investigating things, and that's kind of what you expect, right? I mean, they're not going to have all the answers the next day, the day after. But what Governor DeSantis was saying, and he kept saying repeatedly, is that we're going to be fully transparent. We're going to spend a lot of resources on this. And we're going to let the public know what we find. And the benefit, again, the silver lining for this happening in Florida is that our disclosure laws, when it comes to state activities, they're pretty infamous, right? They're pretty famous for being able to request information, and the state government has to hand them over with the sunshine laws. And so even if, let's say, DeSantis wanted to hide what their investigation found, which is obviously not what he wants to do, but let's say he did, we wouldn't be able to stop that because of what the laws in the state on the books when it comes to that type of stuff. And he and many others have brought up a great point that how can we trust the FBI to investigate the second one when they're still working on the first one in the same state, where in the same area, technically, where the Department of Justice and the FBI are trying to put him and charge him for his documents case. I mean, that's a clear conflict of interest. And yes, they can say they're above it and say, well, this is not political, but people don't buy that, and for good reason. And so I think it's good that there's going to be another set of eyes. Florida is very famous these days for being law and order. for having more competent law enforcement and encouraging that type of environment for people to actually do their jobs, as opposed to some other jurisdictions. So I think overall, I think it gives more of a sense of relief for people that want to know answers. And, there might be more information as the investigation continues that can give us really good answers as to why, again, this got to the level that it did. So it's just, I think it's good for the country overall that there's going to be another set of eyes from a state that is allowing law enforcement to actually be able to do their jobs.
Couldn't agree more. Julio Rosas, right in the middle of it all, basically at all times. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Steve Baker will bring us the latest on his investigation into the second Trump assassination attempt. Don't go anywhere. Did you know there's nearly $1 trillion of infrastructure and pandemic funds that have yet to be spent? That's right. There's a massive amount of money that the lame duck administration is pushing hard to spend in their last few months. And if the president is able to push out these funds, we could see another prolonged inflation surge, just like we had during COVID. And I'm sure that you all remember the terrible effects and the high prices that all Americans had to deal with back at that time. But there is hope, and a surge in prices can be beaten. A gold IRA from Birch Gold Group is the ultimate inflation hedge for your savings in uncertain times. So to see how to protect your IRA or 401k, get your free info kit on gold by texting the word Jill to 989898. Birch Gold makes it seamless to roll over your retirement account while preserving your tax advantage status. So don't wait for the president's spending spree to tank the dollar any further. Protect your financial future now. Text Jill to the number 989898 to get your free info kit from Birch Gold. Who actually thinks the Secret Service is doing their job these days? A recent article at theblaze.com written by Joe Hanneman and Steve Baker details the Secret Service security failures that led to the second assassination attempt. And Steve joins us in studio now to break it all down. So let's just start kind of big picture. What have you uncovered in regards to this second assassination attempt?
What we've uncovered is more questions that are not being answered yet. That's really, once again, that's the biggest problem, is there's nothing classified about how the Secret Service or the FBI discovered that this particular shooter, Ryan Routh or Routh or whatever you want to pronounce his name, was on the fence line at 1:59 a.m. That's pretty specific information determined by cell phone, geofencing, location, whatever you want to call it. Again, why don't we know how often he was there? Was this his first time out? Was he there by luck of the draw from 3 different courses that President Trump could have played that morning? They could answer all of these questions right now. They could also answer the question about whether that GoPro that was hanging on the fence, mounted on the fence, was set up to broadcast to someone's cellular device or Wi-Fi device in proximity to where he was. All of this is already known to the investigators. They're just not releasing it to us yet. And that's, in my mind, the biggest problem we have right now. Come, once again, do a press conference, answer the logical questions. You're not giving away classified, secure information. Answer the questions.
Yeah, so to recap, I mean, we have the GoPro, was that connected to anything else? And we also had, how did he know, right? How did he know he was there? And we've gone over these options before, but you could just go over those briefly. I mean, could have been chance, right? He could have been staking. He could have known that Trump golfs here a lot of times on Sundays, so he goes every Sunday, week after week, 12 hours and waits. If it was a quote-unquote leak, where would the sources have come from again?
Well, if it was a leak, obviously there's a Secret Service. They're obviously they receive extra personnel assisting them from HSI, Homeland Security investigation. They also have local law enforcement. And this is another thing about this, is if it was known to the Secret Service in advance where the president was going to play golf that day, that has to be passed along to local law enforcement 2 or 3 days in advance. They've got to organize the motorcade there. They've got to organize the bomb sweep dogs. All of these things have to take place in advance. Now, let's talk about this. In the history of human civilization, world leaders going back thousands of years have fooled their own security because they don't trust their own security. And they'll say, okay, I'm supposed to go here, but no, not today. I'm going over here instead, just to throw everybody off. Okay, well, still then, was this a lucky move by Ryan Routh? Or was he staking this place out over and over and over again, waiting for that lucky moment? Or was he lucky the first time? They know already. We just need to know when he got to Florida and why he was in Florida, how long he was in Florida, and how many times he went to that location. And they know the answers to those questions.
Yeah, I mean, and to be clear, as Eric Prince said yesterday, I mean, there's a lot of different options. I mean, someone could have leaked it to a staffer, right, who was being paid by someone else to then call up, oh, I think Trump's coming tomorrow. But anyway, we know that we need to stay on that beat. I think the world is asking that question. Anyone with 3 brain cells that aren't fighting each other is asking that question. Let me go to something else that's really important that you've been talking about, and that's the extensive rap sheet that this guy has. Yeah. I keep looking at this back and forth, trying not to put on my conspiracy cap, right, and just say, what are we being presented with on? What are the facts that we know about this would-be assassin? And one of the obvious things that jumps out is this guy has an extensive rap sheet, and there's some curious aspects to this. Lay it all out. Like, just go into some of these.
Right. The most curious aspect of them all is, how does somebody who has had over 100 charges, including felony charges, multiple felony charges, including weapons charges, including what the government calls a weapon of mass destruction, situation, where he held off the Greensboro, North Carolina Police Department and the Guilford County Sheriff Department for 3 hours with a machine gun, and then that was suddenly pled down to a concealed weapons charge and not passed along to federal authorities, because this was a federal crime when we're talking about a machine gun.
What was the date again on that?
That was 2002. All right. And then I interviewed the sheriff, the conservative sheriff who was elected, 24 years, served 24 years in that, or 26 years in that community. And he told me that this particular character was notorious with his own department, the sheriff's department there, and that they had hundreds of interactions with him between the sheriff's department and the local police. And that he actually said these words to me: he's just the kind of guy that would have been easily recruited because of his character. But most curious, with all of these charges, 74 arrests, how much time did he spend incarcerated? None.
Probably nothing.
None. Zero.
That is crazy.
Yeah, I want to get your take. So Representative Eli Crane is one of the 2 congressmen that are leading the parallel investigation for the first Trump assassination attempt. And I saw this week that he said something. So I want to know if you agree or disagree with what he said, because he said, as a former Navy SEAL, one of the things that he noticed about the final firing position was he didn't cut a hole in the chain link fence to make sure that the bullet wasn't deflected by the chain. He said that's a pretty common thing for a trained shooter to do something like that. And the other thing that he noticed that he thought was a little weird were the ceramic plates that everybody's seen in that photo on the chain link fence, those 2 black plates that are there. He said that's unusual that you would put something that could be seen by a visual observer. And when you're a sniper and you're trying to conduct something like that, Crane says, you don't want anything on your body or anything around you to look outside of the normal habitat. So what's your response to that?
Well, my response is to convey what we learn from our sources. We actually have in our quiver of arrows is a collection of guys who actually, for their careers, train Secret Service snipers and SWAT snipers and other types of agencies. This is what they do for a living. And what they have conveyed to us is, first of all, this guy is not trained. This guy was a pure amateur. First of all, the weapon system that he was using, an SKS, it's a $300 version of an AK-47. It is not very accurate. In fact, what they tell us is that up to 300 yards away, the dispersion of that round is going to be quite wide and would easily miss its target. And so this guy was not a pro. And he obviously had not only not the specific training in terms of sniper training, but he did, as he said, several other things that were rather weird. Hanging up the backpacks with the ceramic plates in there would be an obvious giveaway. And then, of course, then there's the story that the Secret Service put out that one of their agents actually recognized or saw the rifle barrel. And all of our experts say, no, that didn't happen. Not unless that person or that agent was close enough to actually hit the target with their own handgun, their service weapon, because that's what we've been told, is that the return fire, of course, there was never fire apparently from Ryan Routh, but whoever shot at him from the Secret Service used their quote-unquote service weapon. That doesn't indicate a rifle. That means very close contact. If they were that close, they should have hit him.
Well, Steve has a busy week. He'll be all over this. You and Joe Hanneman have been doing great work, and I look forward to the latest updates with you later this week.
Thanks, Jill.
Well, Chris Bedford will come on and shed some light on the tensions between Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump. Up next. The good news is you don't have to wait until November to vote. You can vote every day with your dollar. At goodranchers.com, you can make a powerful choice to vote for American meat, support American agriculture, and make your voice heard for transparency in our food. Good Ranchers sources all their meat exclusively from American farms, which not only supports local ranchers, but it also ensures that you receive high-quality American-raised meat with no antibiotics, none of those hormones or seed oils ever. So by shopping from goodranchers.com, you're making a statement about the kind of values that you stand for, the values of quality, hard work, and dedication to the American tradition. And right now, Good Ranchers is having a presidential promo. So for a limited time, you can get a free add-on for a whole 4 years, which is good until the next election. And that means that when you subscribe to any of their boxes, you get to decide if you want extra plain chicken breast, Angus ground beef, apple, smoked wood bacon, or wild-caught salmon in every order for 4 years. And it's the perfect way to ensure that you have high-quality American meat in your kitchen. Every cut is pre-trimmed, individually packed, and vacuum sealed, which makes your life easier. There's no more messy meal prep and no wasted food because of freezer burn or poor storage packaging. Good Ranchers helps you get the most flavor and value out of every ounce of meat you buy. And in this economy, that means more and more each day. So don't miss out. Use my code JILL to claim this presidential promo worth over $1,200 and claim $25 off your first box, plus free express shipping, and bring 100% American meat to your family meals until 2028. It's goodranchers.com, code JILL. Goodranchers.com. American meat delivered. Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump are at odds. While Trump recoups from his second near-assassination attempt, Mitch McConnell is out there and certainly concerned about military spending and potentially raising taxes. Chris Bedford, senior editor for politics and Washington correspondent for Blaze Media, explains this riff in his latest Beltway brief at theblaze.com/Bedford. And he joins us now. Chris, it's been a few days, so excited to have you back on the program. And let's deep dive into this division between McConnell and Trump.
It's great to be back. It's great to feel good again. So McConnell on Donald Trump and McConnell and GOP donors and McConnell on the Republican base have really not been on the same page for a long time. McConnell, I've written about this for the Blaze before, really is best summed up as someone leading his own party of appropriators with their own specific agenda. For him, his additional little interests usually are Republican judges, which can be helpful from time to time to the GOP, but also protecting campaign finance reform and stopping that from going through. Now, recently, he wants to stake his legacy on the Ukraine war. So we come off this weekend where Donald Trump has now undergone his second assassination attempt. And we come off this past week where House Republicans are fighting, although not doing too well, fighting to attach the SAVE Act to a continuing resolution. This is something, by the way, that the Republican nominee, Donald Trump, has been pushing for. He did so again today, very angrily, very loudly, said if you don't pass this SAVE Act, if you don't do this thing that we've been talking about in the show now for months, then there's no reason to negotiate with Democrats. Maybe you guys in Capitol Hill should get used to winning as opposed to simply losing. Mitch McConnell's ignoring all of that. He has his lunch, which helps set the agenda every single week that the Senate's in session. The Republican leadership holds its members only off the record Tuesday lunch. And everyone files in here kind of expecting to get their marching orders. And the entire thing is essentially, at least the main thing, the main thrust of the lunch is a presentation by the Rand Corporation about how more money as a percentage of GDP needs to be going to the Pentagon, and that maybe raising taxes is the way to do that. It's off message for what the Republican campaign is doing, which is campaigning on lower taxes and making tax cuts. It's off message from Republican and I think American criticism of the Pentagon, which right now is at all-time recruitment lows. Is no one's been fired yet, as was pointed out in the debate and repeatedly before. No one's been fired for the disastrous and deadly withdrawal from Kabul. Not a single consequence. Mitch McConnell wants to send them more money. And this is kind of part of his broader strategy and a lot of the Senate GOP strategy, which is to try to tie the hands of an incoming administration, especially if it's Trump's, on foreign policy by eventually negotiating a deal that would allow for spending on the Ukraine war for, if Lindsey Graham were to get his way, up to 10 years appropriated by Congress and protected by Congress. That sets him up for a clash with basically everyone else on the right.
Chris, it's worth stopping for a minute just to explain to people, because it's hard to accept this is the way it is. And you might characterize it differently than I would, but to explain to people that Mitch McConnell is essentially his own side, his own power base, right? He represents Washington, D.C., and that he is able to keep that position because he has hundreds of millions of dollars that he uses, some people would say like a mob boss, and doles out to Senate candidates to keep them going. So what you need to understand if you're in the audience is that if you are in charge of your party in the Senate, that means you control a pot of money that you dole out. That's what keeps you in charge. I mean, could you talk about that a little bit in your own words and how people just need to understand? I mean, if you're going to look at this in terms of power, this is its own power base, right? He's out from under Trump.
Yes, exactly. The Senate Leadership Fund, which he is in charge of and pulls the strings on, is one of the main things that provides cash if you want to be a U.S. senator, or if you want to defend your seat against a primary challenge, or if you want to defend your seat against the Democratic Party. Mitch McConnell is explicit on this. If you're a Republican senator who crosses him in any way, you're not getting that money. And his people, which are throughout Washington, he's the longest serving party leader in Senate history. His people are well entrenched. They're in all the certain networks. They're the kind of folks who will make a call. Let's say you're a campaign consultant and you say, I'm going to take a job with this Tea Party candidate back in 2010, maybe, or maybe this MAGA candidate in 2018. And it's not the person that Mitch McConnell wants. And his team are going to call you and say, if you take this job, you'll never work in this town again. And oftentimes that's an empty threat, but not with these guys. I mean, you will work. I know some people who are extremely successful, but you'll never get the party's candidate again. You'll never get the preferred people. They decide who they're going to back. They decide who they're going to throw to the wind. It's an incredible amount of power, and it's not even just in Mitch McConnell. It's like in any classic power structure or any machine. It's in all the people who are now dependent on that. And most likely, depending on who the next party leader is after he leaves office in November, it's going to be those people who take over the infrastructure. The folks that McConnell's empowered over 10, 20 years aren't just going to disappear. They're going to continue because they've still got all of the access, all the insider knowledge. And it's something he wields. If you look at McConnell's career, he can be extremely effective on certain things. But one of his main powers is pulling Republican votes over to Democratic causes and getting them the votes they need to pull together what they call a bipartisan coalition. That's what he'll call his big policy wins. And because he does that, Democrats will allow him to tack on his little party, his personal wants, his needs, whether it's Ukraine war now or something on campaign finance or something for his home state. They don't care. It doesn't get in the way of their agenda. And it makes him one of the kingmakers of D.C.
Bedford, you want to talk about entrenched politics. Let's move on to the Teamsters, because they made news today because they're not going to endorse a presidential candidate for the first time since 1996. What is your assessment of what you see there from the Teamsters?
Well, I think they read their internal polling. I mean, the union membership in general has been moving more and more towards Donald Trump. He's speaking their language, and the Democrats more and more are not. I mean, Kamala Harris is very bad at this. Even when she goes out and talks to black audiences, she can put on her accent, but she's talking about white female college professor ideas. It's the same thing when she goes to union audiences. She's not able to fit in remotely in the same way that someone like Trump, despite wearing brownie suits, has always been able to do. He's a kind of a guy's guy. And the Teamsters are an interesting set because that union, it's a very physical work union. It's almost entirely men. And that makes it different from the SEIU or other places, which generally speaking is going to make it more conservative, more Republican leaning. They used to have kind of a complicated past. One, they hated the Kennedys, as is well known. If you watch any great mob movies, that might come up. So they backed Reagan. They backed Nixon. But the last time they endorsed a Republican for president was 1988. The next election, they endorsed Bill Clinton. And then, like you mentioned, they kind of started to hold their nose because, well, leadership is largely in the bag for Democrats, although they did speak at the RNC this year. The members just aren't going to do it. So they're not ready to fully change tail and move parties yet, but their members just won't let them back the Democrats. And now it's Kamala Harris. And even before that, Joe Biden likely was going to lose that support.
Well, step one, Chris Bedford. It's a good step, and we'll just wait and see how this all plays out. Thanks so much for your time.
Great to be back.
Are presidential debates irrelevant? Our next guest will explain why he thinks so when we return. After more than 235 years, the radical left is saying that we need saving from the Constitution. And they're starting by working to end the independence of the Supreme Court. And they want to create their own supermajority by packing the court with enough hand-picked justices to get the outcomes that they want. And even President Biden has gotten into the act by making reforming the court one of his final priorities before he leaves office. But don't be fooled, because their endgame is really court packing. And at First Liberty, we call this an assault on the court. What it really is, a Supreme Court coup. These extremists want to eliminate the court's conservative majority by packing the Supreme Court with their own handpicked justices to get the outcomes that they want. And the frightening thing is that come January, their plan could actually become our nation's reality. And a simple majority votes in the House and Senate could be combined with the president's signature and could turn their plan back to pack the Supreme Court into law. But right now, if we unite our voices and if we take action together, we can put a stop to the radical left's plan to take control of the Supreme Court. The future of the court, of preserving an independent judiciary, is literally in our hands. And that's why we're taking action. And we need you to join us, because with a million patriots like you standing for the court, we can safeguard the independence of the judiciary. And that's just exactly what the founding fathers intended. And by saying no to the left's Supreme Court coup, we can secure the blessings of liberty and protect the future of our constitutional rights for our children and grandchildren. So go to supremecoup.com/Jill. That's supremecoup.com/Jill to learn how you can help stop the radical left's takeover of the Supreme Court. Do presidential debates still matter? Was anyone's mind actually changed by watching Kamala Harris and Trump go at each other last week? James Poulos, BlazeTV host of Zero Hour, thinks not. He joins us now to explain why. So James, I mean, come on, let's break this down. When we look at it, why do you think that debates are dead right now in the current political culture?
Tune in, look on TV. Are these debates? Does anyone see a debate taking place here? It's a battle of memes. Memes ate the debates. We're not living in Lincoln Douglas times anymore. The book isn't the most powerful communications technology out there. Even the television isn't. So, I mean, love it or hate it, it's time to recognize two people thoughtfully reviewing the evidence and making well-formed arguments in order to find the real truth. That's not what's going on here.
Okay, so what has replaced debates already in terms of social influence? I mean, I guess what you're saying is we still have debates, but they're not what you just said. They're not what people say they want them to be. Why are we even pretending Lincoln Douglas lived a long, long time ago? So how have they been replaced? What's evolved?
Well, I think, you've got identity politics, and it's not the identity politics of yesterday. You look at, Hillary Clinton, who is considered to be sort of this avatar of identity politics. I'm with her and all that. I mean, her big thing was the politics of meaning. And, what we're arguing about right now is whether there's even such a thing as meaning. How do you know meaning when you see it? Everything's a propaganda war. Even the good guys are sort of like, well, we know that we're not really going to get ahead unless we participate in this kind of free-for-all, this gladiatorial match in what is supposed to be some kind of global public square. So, you look at a guy like Elon Musk and you say, like, well, where would we be if the rules of the game in that global public square weren't what he's allowing them to be? And it's a little bit head snapping to think that maybe there's this one guy and he's kind of determining whether the Constitution lives or dies, at least as far as the election is concerned. But yeah, I think the memes won. I don't know how long the memes are going to be on top. People are starting to look toward artificial intelligence for all the answers. And if you're looking toward some cluster of computer intelligences to tell you everything about who you are and why, then you're probably not going to look to the memes anymore. So all is in flux. And this is an important time to not get confused. It's obviously you can have a lot of fun with the memes, and sometimes they tell more truth than these supposed truth tellers or journalists out there. But I think you got to watch everything that you see with a grain of salt.
All right, James, we need to talk because I'm a Swiftie. And you have another piece on Return explaining how Donald Trump could be the voice for women who don't like Taylor Swift. So what do you mean by that? What are we doing?
Well, yeah, I mean, talk about a lack of debate. You've got Donald Trump dropping one of those immortal pieces of social media that he does so well, love him or hate him. I hate Taylor Swift in all caps. I mean, that is as far from a debate as you can get, but it's powerful. And why is it powerful? Because no one else of similar stature is out there saying it's okay not to like Taylor Swift. You don't have to take the Swift pill. I mean, it's sort of like what happened to Beyonce. Like one day she was just another pop star out there hustling and, making some infectious tunes. The next minute she seemed to be some sort of phenomenon on the scale of like the Chinese Olympics Games opening ceremonies or something. And we've seen that happen with Taylor Swift. She blew past Beyonce, blew past Kanye. She's really become kind of this machine. There's some incredible stuff coming out recently about Irving Azoff, the sort of super agent and this kind of world that he's constructed with Live Nation and these other mega corporations. Taylor Swift is part of that beast, and especially with her celebrity boyfriend in the sports world, and now the endorsement of Kamala Harris. She's really taken on these kind of superhuman proportions. And I hear from women and I hear from guys, wives, girlfriends talking about how they really aren't feeling the tay-tay anymore, and that has become something that this is chilled speech. It's something that you're not supposed to say. People get mad at you if you say it, but it's out there. And it was remarkable to me that love her or hate Donald Trump, he's really kind of the biggest guy out there in social media and in the real world who stood up and said to people, it's okay to want to be off the Swift train.
I still love her. It's okay.
It's okay.
Well, it certainly is a great example if you're coming off of guess what, kids, smart people arguing in debate school isn't going to change the world. And then this is really what changes the world. These are the kind of jousts in the public square. So I would add to that. I mean, Trump, by saying I hate Taylor Swift, we should talk more about this, who's become this, like you said, a machine, right? A kind of like unstoppable force that you're not allowed to like. It's that status. He's done that. But the other thing I think that Trump was thinking was, okay, if you're going to go against me, I'm going to make it hurt, right? I mean, you're going to lose supporters because I'm going to at least jab and divide if you want to play politics. But I want to go back to, we can come back to Taylor if we need to. We can come back. We might still have to resolve some things here. But I think that I want to go back to this idea about what is truly driving public discourse. And I think there are a lot of people hanging on to what you describe who refuse to believe that anything else other than argument back and forth will resolve and ultimately save America. And I think you should say more about that, because they would say, well, what will work then? I'm about finding the truth. And the only way we can find the truth is to have smart people say the right words and reveal the truth through these words while they joust on stage. And oh my gosh, it hasn't happened in decades, but maybe it will happen tomorrow. So what is the answer?
60 seconds, James.
Yeah, well, I mean, you want to see how the smart people talking about stuff to make truth thing is working. Take a look at science. I mean, the replicability crisis is a nightmare. They all did really bad on COVID. There are signs everywhere. Taylor was known for her authenticity and her vulnerability. But you look at that endorsement statement of Kamala Harris, it's just boilerplate straight out of like wokeai.com or, wherever you get your woke AI from. It wasn't very authentic. It wasn't very heartfelt. It didn't speak the truth, right? It didn't feel like the truth. And I think communication with people at scale where you're being spiritually open and vulnerable to them in a way that has authenticity to it, I think that's where the future's at.
We completely agree on that. That's why I say it could have been so much worse when Taylor Swift came out with her endorsement. James, thanks so much.
It all came back together there.
It did. And you know what? What's going to come back together? We're going to get back to sports here, because that's what we love to do, because the Miami Heat wade into the culture wars and they get clobbered with memes. We'll break down how they took the L online next. Listen, if you don't know by now, over the last few weeks, we have been discussing the rumors of the Haitian migrants in Springfield, Ohio. They're eating our pets. They're eating the local pets and ducks in the park. And you know what? The Miami Heat basketball team decided to jump into the fray, because why not? Blaze News reporter Andrew Chapados wrote in a recent article on theblaze.com all about this. And Andrew joins us now. So can you explain what the Miami Heat and their diversity statement said on the matter?
No, I can't, actually. It's great to be back. But I can't explain it. Nobody on their team is Haitian. Their only foreign players are two white guys from Sweden and Serbia. And the population of Miami, it's not nothing. I think the last count is around 3%. So I'm not sure why an NBA team that typically doesn't involve itself in stuff like this, in politics like this, as far as I can tell, unlike the Golden State Warriors, for example, where Steph Curry is always praising Kamala Harris and everything. I'm not sure why they would dip into this. Clearly, there must be staff members on their team or somebody working within their organization who got very offended by this. But for a NBA basketball team, just for no reason almost, or reasons unbeknownst to the general public, to get into this very, hotly debated political topic is really strange for me. And the fans really have let them know about this in the replies, in the comments. They're getting hit with the same memes everybody else is getting hit by that have become very popular and published by Trump himself, him hugging the cats and dogs and the ducks.
I mean, this isn't surprising given what we've seen in the last week and even today and last night, where people continue to find evidence of, as if it even matters. This was a rumor on the internet, but it was also a complaint by people in the town. You see that recently they found a police report, right, detailing this in Springfield, and the city manager was talking about it, 5 seconds ago before it became an issue. Is there any other effect from the response yet? In other words, people have just pilloried the Heat and been like, this is bullcrap. Has there been any indication that this is making them back off?
I mean, I haven't seen any. This isn't the sort of thing that an NBA team, stays like once they make the mistake, they don't all of a sudden just back off and say, hey, we were wrong about that. They didn't do that for vaccine mandates, even though the NBA had the highest number of players of any league, I would imagine, that refused to take the vaccine. But I haven't seen anything. I could be wrong. But most of the time when this sort of stuff happens and when teams are on the wrong side of history or they get proven wrong about something political, they don't go back and correct it. Like LeBron James doesn't go back and say that he was wrong about voter registration laws, and Steph Curry doesn't go back and say that actually Kamala Harris did do a good job. So I haven't seen it, but I wouldn't expect it.
I want to know how you respond to this, because it says former Democratic presidential candidate Marianne Williamson said on X that continuing to dump on Trump because of the eating the cats issue will create blowback on November 5th. What do you think?
I mean, I think she's right. It's the power of the memes. You don't really want to go against something that's really tracking for the right wing and the conservative party, because it is often the case that conservatives don't know how to tap into the culture or do something that goes really viral and is cool with a bipartisan appeal. So when something like this happens and Trump's having songs made up about him and AI generated memes made up about him, and the culture is backing it and finding it hilarious, whether it's true or not, proven or unproven, that doesn't tend to go in their direction very often. So I think they're happy to capitalize on that. And you don't want, if you're the Democrats, you know, Donald Trump's the boogeyman. He's evil. The orange man is indeed bad. So you don't want to normalize him and make him funny or cool in any way, I don't think.
Well, he is funny. He is cool. He is Donald Trump. Thanks so much, Andrew, for joining us today.
Thanks again.
Yeah, we just had the Peachy Keenan cat meme up there with Donald Trump on the plane holding the cats and the ducks next to him. I mean, that's really gaining some traction. That has some legs. It's sticking around. It has staying power.
So we have to explain that, you know, the memes led to what? I mean, they led to presidential candidates arguing about this issue. They led to international election interference by foreign governments delivering bomb threats into Springfield. The left using that to attack people on the right. This is a live issue. I mean, this is not going away, and you can tell it's the effect of the memes by the fact that it stung so bad that the left is not going to let this go away.
Well, and it almost jumps in with the point that James Poulos was making of the presidential debates don't matter anymore because the presidential debate was on Tuesday. The memes started the Sunday night before. We're still talking about the memes. We're not talking about the presidential debate or either candidate's performance anymore.
Oh, absolutely. Like, look, the ruling class cannot abide anyone else controlling the media and controlling the narrative. And that's exactly what happened with the memes. So the debate doesn't matter because, you know, the idea of the debate, I mean, it's already been decades, right, since we had a debate where there was a real debate back and forth. This is all about sound bites and images anyway. You know, a real debate, real intellectual arguments don't make for good TV.
No,
it's nothing against TV.
No, they don't.
They just don't make for good TV.
I want to go back to the point that Steve Deace made on the show the day after the debate and said, hey, let's just have the candidates themselves go back and forth. Or you could also have questions from normal people. They could submit them ahead of time and everybody just knows, okay, this is how it's going to go. But you don't need the moderators. Like, the actual format of the debate that we use right now is outdated.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And because the key is actually what James said, I believe what's really going on here is people desire authenticity of spirit, of your soul. Like, who really are you, right? In an age of smoke and mirrors and AI and modulation and all this fakery. So how do you get to just some glimpse into who this person is? Well, if you can see them, like you see what they tweet and they're really tweeting, that's going to tell you something because it's coming right from them. There's no speechwriter involved, right? It's actually going to tell you more about them perhaps than other things. So you want to see them on screen just revealing something about themselves where you say, I don't think that was faked.
And finally, we will definitely be staying on all of the unanswered questions. We had Julio Rosas on, we had Steve Baker on. They are talking about the second attempt on Donald Trump's life, and we'll continue to break everything down, try and get you all of the answers. So if you like Blaze News Tonight, subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, and don't forget to rate and review the show. It helps everybody else out to find it. So don't go anywhere, though. We're going to be breaking it down. I mean, hopefully we don't have any more crazy stuff with Donald Trump, but we'll have it all for you tomorrow night.
5 stars. 5 stars.